Okay. All right. Welcome to Empower to Lead's team call for March 21st. I posted a poll in the team page earlier what you guys wanted to work on, and I was thinking a power hour might be useful because it's been a while since we've done that, but fear has been something that I've been digging into more. I think that it's something we're constantly digging into on this journey, and I think that your perspective of it changes as you change and as you do things different. And it seems like a lot of you, this is something that you want to do. So that's what we're chatting about tonight. But before I dive in, I just want to remind everybody that Super Saturday is coming up. There's going to be a lot of really awesome announcements coming at Summit with a new trainer and some new product launches. And you definitely don't want to miss this. So if you're not registered for one in your local area, figure out where you can get to one, buy yourself a ticket and go. Super Saturdays are just incredible to be able to work out with live trainers, to hear all the updates from the company, to meet coaches in your local area. If you've been to one, you know what I'm talking about. And if you haven't, then you definitely need to go. So that again is April 7th weekend. Some places have them Friday nights, some have Sundays, most have Saturdays. But I'll post that link again in the team page tomorrow. Otherwise, you can just FAQ it and check it out. So who's registered? I'm curious. Who's registered for Super Saturday? I know Brittany is going to come with me. You don't have any near you, Laura? Okay. Well, hopefully we can up our attendance.
I'm going to the DC one. Pretty excited about that one with Autumn.
What is it?
The DC. I'm going to drive up to DC and meet up with some challengers, actually. They're going to come with me.
Oh, that's awesome. I love that. Okay. All right. Let's dive in. Let's get started. First and foremost, I have to tell you that clearly I'm not an expert on this topic. But I feel like the longer you've been around and the more things that you have to overcome, the more you kind of learn how fear really works for you. And the more you really dig into personal development, different things are going to speak to you and help you kind of gain insight and gain awareness in this area. And just personal awareness in itself is such a huge facet to this. So I took some time today to kind of write out some notes of things that I do to personally work through fear. And I just have to share that I had this like major aha moment the other day, because I have for a long time really wanted to write a book. And I shared this with Dave last night, actually, because I for a long time have really wanted to write a book, and I've had people tell me I should write a book. And I've always kind of thought like, well, I have to get to this certain place before I can do that, or I have to achieve XYZ first, or I have to like be in a different place in my life, or have more time in my schedule, or whatever it is. Like, you have those things that you know you want to do, yet you always feel like there's something you have to get to or something you have to do for you to like feel ready, right? And so I was thinking a lot about this, just because I'm starting to feel like I'm really kind of ready to take action on that. And I was thinking, what is it that really keeps holding me back? And so digging into that thought more, I was thinking all of the things that I fear, it's like the rejection, or is anybody going to want to read the things I have to say? Or what if it's a total flop? What if it fails, right? Like all of these things. And then I started thinking, hello, like these are all of the same things that I've been working to overcome for the past 4+ years as a coach. Like when you make your first post on social media, you're fearing what other people are going to think about what you have to say. You're fearing what other people are going to think about you being on a fitness journey and sharing it. You're fearing, rejection, or what people are going to think about if you put a transformation post out there. Like, so my first thing that I want to like help you guys think about is, think about the fears that you've already had to overcome to be doing what you're doing right now. And in a way of like observing those things to help you build your confidence and your ability to overcome more fear, because you're probably overcoming more fear or have already overcome more fear than you're actually giving yourself credit for. Do you think so? If you stop and think about it? Yeah. most of you probably had a major fear about joining as a coach, right? So that in itself is like, you're here and you're doing it and you're taking action. So there are fears that you're overcoming every single day in terms of what we do as coaches and being on our journeys, right? So really kind of leaning into
what are you doing, Zoe?
Playing out your past successes in overcoming failures to help you develop that confidence to do more. And hold on, I gotta mute some people. Okay. So let's see. Hold on a second. Okay. So I wrote down a couple things that I'm just gonna kind of go through, and I would suggest taking notes because it is a lot of things, and maybe certain things will click to you and maybe certain things won't. But these are a lot of things that I do and kind of have like applied to kind of work through. And I think that I was listening to a podcast the other day, and I'll actually link it in the team page after this call because everyone should listen to it. But she really talks about like not judging yourself for having fear. And that's something I've been thinking a lot about lately too, is like, how often do you judge yourself for having negative emotions? Or how often do you judge yourself when you feel fear? And you're just like, God, why can't you figure this out? Or like, why is this so hard for you? Or like, why do you fail all the time? Or why do you give up so easily? Right. And we judge ourselves instead of saying like, how can I use this feeling and these emotions constructively rather than like shaming myself for having them, right? Because they're all human emotions and everybody feels them. And I think that sometimes because we are on such a growth course of trying to be positive all the time, that sometimes we want to reject the things that we don't want to feel, right? And that's not necessarily, she calls it buffering. She calls it trying to buffer out the negative things. And she says, you know, like you'll try to numb it with food or with distraction or with procrastination or with drinking or with self-sabotaging or whatever, but trying not to numb the things that you need to feel so that you can actually learn to move and work through them. So breaking through and like allowing yourself to feel the fears that you have first and foremost is like the most important thing, right? Because typically we're afraid to allow ourselves to actually feel the emotion that lies behind why we have the fear anyways. Okay, so I want to like kind of highlight too that fear is learned, right? Like we don't come into this world full of fear-based thinking. Like those are things that are learned and developed over the course of time through experiences we've had or things we had happen in childhood or rejections or relationships or friendships or, you know, embarrassment or things that have brought you shame in your life. Fear is something that we have learned. Therefore, it's something we can also teach ourselves to like unlearn and think differently, right? So I think that it's important to know that we are choosing the habit of leaning into fear rather than starting to choose differently. Okay, so let's get into the nitty gritty. And these are the things that I like highlighted to make sure I cover. Hold on, I gotta read the comments. Cheryl, I think everybody's really good at numbing. Everybody numbs differently though. Distraction is great numbing for me. That's one of my numbing mechanisms. Okay, so the first thing is to honor the fear that you have rather than trying to reject this. And I thought it was like something really cool. It was a DTC call. I forget who it was, but she said, stop trying to work around your fears. She was like, I want you to pretend like you're taking a flashlight to the fears that you have, that you hide in these deep little parts of yourself that you feel if you hide them deep enough, you don't ever actually have to like expose them or feel them, right? And that at some point, maybe they're just going to go away. But what if you were to take a flashlight and like shine it all over what the truth of that fear really is so that you can start observing it and working through it rather than trying to work around it, because we cannot outrun those things. And at some point we have to come face to face with them, right? Can you agree? Like, have you ever tried to think like, well, I can just work my way around this and like ignore it. And then you come face to face with it a couple months down the road in another scenario, right? So choosing to honor that. And I think that, we have to remind ourselves that on the flip side of fear is courage, right? So we are either choosing fear or we're choosing courage. You can say you're choosing love, you're choosing faith, whatever. If you read The Universe Has Your Back, she says choosing love. But on the opposite side of the fence is fear, is courage. And courage is also a choice that we can make too, right? So we continuously develop more courage by doing the things that scare us. And how you do that is different for everybody, and the ways that you do it is different for everybody. But I think that we do ourselves a massive disservice if we try to A, pretend that the fear isn't there, B, work around it, or 3, take no action in spite of it to try and start to work to build our courage rather than continue to feed our fear. Does that make sense? Okay, so like I said, awareness is really important, self-awareness. I would encourage you, like you guys hear me say all the time, like if you can learn to master yourself, that you can master anything in this business. Because if you truly think about the bottom line of the basic things that we have to do daily, they're really simple. It is just us that gets in the way of those things, right? It is our thinking, it's our procrastination, it's our lack of, consistency, or the fear that we have, or whatever, that keeps us from really, really doing the basic things. So becoming an observer of like how you think, how things make you feel when you feel fear. Why do you feel that fear? Why are you putting something off? Like become a master of like observing yourself and learning who you are and figuring out why you tick. And I promise that like matching that with your PD is so transformative in your life, because once you can figure out who you are and like why you do things the way that you do, it's not like you have this magic moment of like, oh, this is how I tick, and so it's just an easy fix. Like you're still going to have to trudge through working through it. But if you have that awareness, that's the first step to it not really owning power over your life anymore, right? Because it's a willingness to say like, this is mine, I own it, and I can become something different or change this, right? So that awareness is so key. The next thing is to identify, to get really specific about what your fears are. Like I said, it's kind of like shining the light on them and actually owning what these fears are for you. And then digging into the beyond the surface reason of why you have these fears. And I mean, I feel like this kind of like starts to get into like the therapy mode of like, where do these fears stem from? But I can tell you personally that some of the fears that I have always struggled with are fear of inadequacy, fear of worthiness, fear of abandonment, fear of rejection, fear of not being good enough, fear of failure, fear of success. And I'm sure that you can list off your, fears that you have, and kind of take each one of these. And, as you're on your journey and as you're doing your PD and as you're kind of developing the self-awareness, to dig more into each one of those fears and really figure out where they stem from for you. I can tell you that a lot of mine stem from past situations that I've been through, whether it's in my childhood or in past relationships or traumatic experiences that I've had. But getting to the root of where those come from for me and kind of shedding truth upon them and working to heal in that area has been massively helpful for me, to no longer allowing it to just be an excuse for me. Because I feel like a lot of times we make excuses rather than owning that it's a fear. Like, for example, if you're like, I just don't have the time to do inviting, right? Or I don't know enough people to invite, or nobody's going to say yes to me. Underneath that might really be a fear of rejection, or fear of not being good enough to help somebody else on their journey, or fear of what happens if you fail, right? So what I'm saying is, like, a lot of times if you're observing why you're making excuses or why you're not doing the things you want to be doing, like I said about writing this book, like, why am I not taking action on that? I observe what the underlying fear is, where that really comes from for me. And you can start to shed truth upon that. And I feel like there's a lot of power in that when you start to figure out where it comes from for you, because it's obviously extremely different for everybody. The next thing that I put down is curiosity. So instead of looking at fear like it is our enemy and the whole, like F fear mantra and all of that, like I love all that stuff too. But at the end of the day, like I think that we in some way, shape or form have to kind of become friends with fear, and be okay with the fact that we do have fears and get curious about our fears. Like I'm saying, digging more into those. What are the thoughts and beliefs that I have that feed this fear? When do I feel this fear the most? What do I do when I feel this fear? Again, because a lot of us are going to go into like coping mechanisms or distraction or, just like procrastinating something or whatever. But what are the thoughts and beliefs that you have that feed your fear? When do you feel it? What do you do when you feel it? Like, how do you react? And how do you feel limited by that fear? And just kind of start observing all of those things. And the cool part is that once you start to really dig into where these things come from for you, that I can literally catch myself now saying like, I'm not doing XYZ today. And I totally know that this is like fear-based thinking and I'm self-sabotaging. And like, you can start to become so self-aware that you can catch yourself in the doing, and not saying like you're perfect and it's never going to happen. But if you're self-aware of it, sometimes you can stop it and choose differently rather than continuing to let it kind of spiral and like let fear run the show, if that makes sense. Does that make sense? I don't know if I'm like getting too crazy over here. Okay. So the next thing, well, I wrote down healing, but I already talked about healing. Healing the roots of where those fears come from is important. And I feel like that's an ever ongoing process. At least it is for me. The next thing is to be present in the now. So like working to be really present in the moment with whatever you're doing, whether it's like you're on a team call, like being present here, whether you're sitting down to do your power hour and like messaging people, being present in that moment. Being present, whatever it is you're doing in your day, right? Because a lot of the times we have anxiety or we feed fear when we're thinking about the past failures we've had, past actions that haven't worked out for us, the way that we've functioned in the past. If it's something that we wish we could change, like we have a habit of doing well for 3 days and then falling off track for 2 weeks, like, right? You have this fear that you're going to keep creating the same thing over and over. And being present in the now allows you to kind of be in the space where the past doesn't continue to like eat you alive to where you can't do something better right now, right? And not being in the future focus kind of like releases that need of anxiety or like attaching to the outcome or having expectations of what's going to happen or having the fear of how things are going to play out when you don't really know, right? Like we worry so much about the things that haven't even happened yet. And that's feeding fear too. And I really loved this quote that I read in You're a Badass at Making Money. And she says, the very unfunny cosmic joke is that in an attempt to protect ourselves from pain, we perpetuate behaviors that create the very pain we're trying to avoid. And I thought that was like really profound. So being present in the now and giving yourself small tasks that you can accomplish, even if it feels fearful to you. And like you guys, like you can say like, okay, I would like, do you ever have those days you sit down and you're just like, okay, I need to get this done, but I just don't really feel like it right now. And like, it's important to observe if that's like a true thing, like you're really like burnt out and exhausted, or you're having a really hard day, or if it's because there are like fear-based beliefs that are backing you and your brain is looking for an excuse and a way out, right? So being present in the now is huge. If you don't meditate, I highly suggest trying it. It was so awkward to me at first, but it really does make a big difference to kind of shut your brain off for a good 5 or 10 minutes a day and just kind of be in quiet and in the now and in the present space. And I feel like that's the best part of the practice, is learning how to be present. I personally love Insight Timer, the app Insight Timer you can get on your phone, and it gives you guided meditations. Like, you don't have to know what you're doing, and you can feel awkward and just lay there and breathe. But like, meditation really helps you stay present in the now. And then the next thing is transforming your fear with thinking about it with gratitude. So I could give you a list of examples of how you could do this, but I think that you need to specifically think of like, okay, so if you have a fear, let's say you have a fear that you're never going to make enough money to buy yourself a home, right? Like that's a very prevalent fear of something that's gone on through my head in the last couple years, because that's something that I really desire to do for Declan and I. But right, the truth is that if you stay the course and you continue going the direction you're going and you lean into this with faith and with love and with courage, that there's no way those things can't happen for you, right? And you just have to trust the process. But if you can flip your fear on its head with gratitude of like, okay, I have such a fear of sharing something on social media right now, and I'm terrified of being rejected, and I'm terrified to share the coaching opportunity on Facebook because I think that people are going to think that I'm being schemy and salesy and scammy, right? But what if you flip it on its head with gratitude and say that I am so blessed to have a business where I enjoy helping others, where I get to be healthy and fit, where I have the blessing and the platform of social media to share my voice and share my story in a way that can truly impact others' lives. And I'm doing a disservice if I'm not sharing that, right? And it's a very different mindset that you have if you're in a place of fear or rejection or worrying what others think of you, or fear that it doesn't, isn't perfectly worded, versus if you think of gratitude, all that you're grateful for and all that you have the impact to do with something, it helps you see it in a different light, right? So gratitude is so transformative. Other things that are, I feel like, kind of obvious because we talk about all the time, but like journaling, talking to other coaches on the team, talking to your mentor, doing personal development, doing things that bring you joy. But anything that kind of helps you, again, like work through feelings you're having rather than avoidance. Because avoidance won't get us anywhere different in terms of fear, right? The next thing is action. Action builds our courage. And so I was trying to think back to when I was a newer coach, when I felt like deathly afraid of speaking on team calls. And I remember I was 4 months into coaching. I was a diamond coach, and Keith Callahan, if you don't know him, he's Elizabeth Harkey's upline, asked my success partner now of like 4 years to run a Coach Basics training, the two of us to run a training. And I was like, wait, what? Like, I'm a diamond coach. I have no friggin' idea what I'm doing. I've never talked on a team call. Like, I was like terrified. But guys, I can tell you that every single time I got on there and I spoke and I showed up, I grew so much courage to think like, okay, if I just keep showing up and taking like baby steps, doing the shit that scares me, doing the shit that makes me really uncomfortable, doing the things that push me out of my comfort zone, then eventually, like, I don't fear speaking on team calls anymore. I don't fear coming on here. I don't fear when people ask me to go speak on team calls. But we never, ever are going to start to overcome fears if we just chill where we're comfortable. And I'm not saying like go leap off into the deep end and do something that makes you really comfortable, like really, really, really uncomfortable, because I don't think that that's healthy either. And I think that that can throw you in a backward spiral sometimes. But taking baby steps towards the things that are scary for you, and like encouraging yourself and like celebrating when you do it and sharing it with somebody else and saying like, hey, I just did this and it like really scared me. Share that with your success partner, right? It's gonna encourage them to do things too. But it's like back to day one of when I was in a new coach training, and I remember Colleen Curtis saying, hesitation breeds fear, action cures fear. And if we don't take any new actions, then we're never really able to overcome those things, right? So you all know what those are for you. And I'm going to encourage you to pick, 1 to 3 actionable items of like baby steps that you can take in terms of something that is really fearful for you, and that is holding you back. And I wrote down to kind of ponder with yourselves, because I ask myself stuff like this all the time. How is fear limiting my life? How am I allowing fear to limit my life? And this can go for anything. This can go for relationships, for motherhood, for your relationships with your parents, for whatever. It can go for anything, not just business. But how is this in particular fear limiting your life? Because I think that beyond all of this awareness and healing and digging in and all of that kind of stuff, the shifting to gratitude, I think that there needs to be a motivation force for you to actually want to overcome that fear, because with no motivation backing it, there is no reason for you to change, right? I have always been very open about the fact that desperation has been a very great driving force for me, and I really don't have that desperation in my life anymore. And that was a big shift for me, motivation wise, because it's a very different scenario to have desperation in your life versus functioning from a place of inspiration of what you want more of in your life, right? Especially if you are somebody that has a full-time job that isn't relying on this to, it's not the be all end all for you because you have a fallback plan, right? I think that it's important to find the motivational driving forces for you that are strong enough that you actually willingly and want to start to overcome the fears that are keeping you stuck. Because I know for me, without having that driving force or many driving forces, that I don't know if I would have been able to muster up the courage to say, like, I can't let this keep me stuck where I am in my life anymore. And I also think that I was naive to think that at some point I would just be like, I gotta figure it out. Like, I don't fear anything anymore. And I don't think that's true either. I think that the more you level up in your life and the more that you achieve and the bigger goals that you set, there are still fears that you have to come face to face with, and walls that you're going to hit, and, beliefs that you still carry that don't serve you. And that's why personal growth is a never ending thing. But, you have to have some type of a motivational force that's driving you to take those baby steps. Different level, different devil is 100% true. Okay. Oh, and the other thing I just wanted to say is, like, giving yourself the grace to, like, be human with all of this process, because I can tell you for me, and I can pretty much guess that most people would tell you the same, is that it's uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable sometimes to dig into this stuff, guys. Like, it's really uncomfortable sometimes. There's going to be, painful things that you have to, like, remember or think about, or scenarios that you felt a lot of shame or vulnerability or rejection in your life. But I feel like when we allow ourselves to feel things, we give ourselves a permission to really work on healing those things. And it gives us, more of an awareness to move forward in our lives with. And it also changes your perspective, which is also huge. So surrendering to letting yourself feel and honor all of these things, and kind of, not judging yourself in this process of figuring out what lies beneath the surface with your fears, and figuring out the action steps you're going to take to do them. And the last thing that I kind of want to throw out there is, we had Mel Robbins speak at Leadership in November. And if you haven't watched any Mel Robbins, videos or read the 5-second rule, Mel Robbins is absolutely incredible. But this whole topic just kind of reminded me of what she talked about with the 5-second rule. And a lot of it, the way she speaks about it is kind of like taking action in your life, and like overcoming procrastination, and like making yourself do things that like you haven't been able to do yet. But I also think that this concept, it can kind of be applied with fears that we have, right? Because she tells you to count backwards 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And she's like, I know it sounds really stupid and that people pay me a lot of money to teach them these things, but 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 activates your prefrontal cortex in your brain, which is like what helps you take action rather than relying on habitual beliefs that are like ingrained in you, right? So it like gives you more of like a backing to like just get up and do something, or like have that second of courage and like go do it. Like hit the button to go live, hit the post button on that post that you're terrified to make, like send that message to that girl that friggin' terrifies you from high school that you think's gonna reject you. Like have that conversation with that person that you've been avoiding, whatever. Like I think that her concept is fantastic in applying in the things that we've been talking about tonight too. So if you haven't ever watched her videos or listened to any podcasts, she has a great podcast on the School of Greatness too. I definitely would highly suggest listening to her and how she speaks about things too. But one of the things that she says is that we always think like I'm a procrastinator, or like I'm a failure, or I'm a whatever, right? And she's like, I want you to differentiate that you just have a habit of doing that. So we have a habit of choosing fear. We have a habit of procrastinating. We have a habit of not taking action, right? We are not those things. We just have a habit of doing them. And I thought that that was so profound, because I think a lot of times we put labels on ourselves and therefore almost box ourselves into these comfort zones, because I've been like this my whole life. I've always said I'm a procrastinator. I've never been organized. I have XYZ, whatever. And like in doing so, basically made excuses of why I could never do things differently, or why I could never overcome procrastination or whatever. Like, I think that when we observe that it's not a label of who we are and that it's just a habit that we're choosing, we therefore have the power to change it. And I think that that's relevant with this too. So that is all that I have to talk about tonight. And like I said, this is kind of a vague topic in terms of what you take and do with it with coaching, because it's so different for everybody. And it's not like an actionable, like I said in the post, it's not like I can give you a magic wand and say like, here, take this, fix your fear and live your best life. But this is something that I feel like if you can start to develop this awareness and dig into these things, that it 100% can start to transform the action you take and the potential that we can meet. So I hope that it was helpful. Does anybody have questions or comments? You all think I'm crazy now?
I liked that part. It was kind of key and kind of triggered that fears are only habits. They're only patterns. And if we can change
Yep.
our patterns, as far as how we changed how we're eating in the beginning, how
Yep.
we changed our exercise habits, that's really the key to the fears. But the hard part is really figuring out what the habit is. And then I think that kind of comes full circle back to what you started with in the beginning of figuring out what the fear is and what you do when you feel it, what you're avoiding, what you're numbing, and how you're doing it. So that was kind of a good full circle moment there, Dana.
Land in the plane,
Yeah.
That's what it's the podcast I was gonna say go listen to, is the Life Coach School podcast, and I have to look at the name of it. It's something about fear, but she talks a lot about how we buffer feelings that we don't want to feel, or how we distract or numb ourselves. And that if we can work to be aware of those things, then we can start to change them. So I like that was helpful. Anybody else? And I can't see half the people on here though.
Maybe I think as a team builder thing, we can go around to each of us, and maybe if we would like to share something along the lines of what our fear is, and maybe what do you think it stems from? or like just something around the fear and what you do to numb it or what you do to change it.
Or if people aren't comfortable, I can make a post in the team page and people can talk about it too. I'm happy to talk about it. You know me.
Who wants to start?
I can say something.
Go for it.
Because then I have to run. I've never been comfortable about talking about money, honey, especially because that was my biggest objection in the beginning, to not only joining, but the shakes and the whole 9 yards. So, and I'm Irish, so we drink. That's how we dull everything.
Except you're pregnant now, so you can't numb yourself.
Joe thinks I have a bigger problem now because I'm like, man, I could go for a glass of wine. He's like, stop saying that. But anyways, but so what I did to kind of combat that, because I realized that my family never talked about money. My mom still won't talk about anything. Like I was buying a house and I asked like, oh, what do I make compared to what you made when you were my age, just so I can like gauge what I can afford. And she was like, yeah, I'm not talking to you about it. I'm like, oh. So what I did, instead of backing off from it like I'd done my whole life, I really dived in. I found a way to come up with a budget, which I'd never done in my life. And then once I kind of realized that doing that kind of stuff was actually empowering, learning about it, I then started sharing it all the time. I made a free Facebook group, and I kind of jumped in so that when people give me that objection, or when I start to feel that objection, we were just talking about it tonight, padding or figuring out where we could cut stuff. And actually Joe, not me this time, he's like, the only thing that we can really cut is Shakeology, but I don't want to sacrifice health for a little bit extra on the credit card payment every month. And I'm like, oh, I'm rubbing off on you. Kind of hitting it head on made it that much better. And every conversation I have with somebody about it, when they ask me like, how are you paying for this crazy shake while you're so focused on your budget? And then I can just explain why I'm doing it and how I'm doing it and how I won't sacrifice my health to get where I want to be financially, but I'm able to do it together. And every conversation makes it that much more comfortable. So not only am I attacking my fear, but I'm making it, I don't know. You get what I'm saying? Right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Also, you need to read this book.
I have it. It's on my shelf. I've been
Read it.
falling asleep every time I pick up a book lately.
Get it on audio. This book, though, guys, like, I can sympathize. Ashley, I have very similar conversations with my mother. She's always like, oh, she'll compare the same thing of incomes, which is kind of awkward and uncomfortable. I think that your mindset about money is ingrained from when we're young. What we see growing up. Like, I know there was a lot of arguments about that stuff when I was growing up. So money mindset is definitely something that I've been digging a lot into, because there are some weird, not good beliefs that I have about it. I would guess that a lot of people struggle with that. But this book talks a lot about digging into where those beliefs come from for you. It's fantastic, but also the concepts in it can be kind of applied to anything too. Anybody else want to share? Okay, bye. Bye. Nobody. All right. Well, I will make a post in the team page to hear your top takeaways. And if you feel like sharing, you can. And if you don't, that's fine too. But I would suggest having someone in your life that you can talk to these things about. I mean, these are, I guess I would say that your fears and the beliefs that are underneath them and the thoughts that you have and the reasons you have them and all that whole healing process stuff. I feel like these are things that you aren't just going to go put out there publicly or talk to anybody about, right? You're going to talk to people that get you and that you trust about these things. But I would say, like, if you have a success partner or if you want to share them with your coach or share them with your spouse or whatever it is. But I think it's important to find somebody that you can talk to about these things and work through these things with your fears specifically, to kind of have accountability a little bit, to take action in spite of them, to take those baby steps, but also so that you have somebody to talk to in the process of the things when you're feeling them. Because I know for me, like I said, numbing and isolating has always been a very good coping mechanism for me. And I've learned to kind of reach out to people that I trust and that will hold space for me when I have things I need to share and talk about, so that you can kind of work through them and speak truth to them rather than numbing them and stuffing them down like we typically want to do. So I will see you guys next week. Katie. All right. I love you guys. See you next week. Bye.